here has ever felt angry? Yeah, me too. Anger is one of those emotions that can hit like a freight train. It feels like it's just barreling towards you, fast, overwhelming, just gonna run you over, leave you splattered on the tracks. It's just awful. And for those of us in addiction recovery and for people who love them, anger, I'm telling you, it can be more than just a bad mood. It can be a trigger. And that trigger can be a dangerous pull toward old coping mechanisms that promise you a relief, but that relief can come at a cost. So, what do we do when anger flares up? How do you keep it from dragging you down a path you have worked or you're working so hard to leave behind? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about real, practical ways to manage anger and its triggers. So, whether you're in recovery or you're supporting someone who is, this podcast can help you out. Hi, welcome to Bookends of Recovery. This is a podcast where healing and hope, and most importantly, you take center stage. And I'm Laura, and I'm very grateful that you're spending time with me. As most of you know, anger often isn't just about the thing that just set you off. It's not that wet towel on the floor again, right? It's like, I'm so pissed off. Why did you leave the towel on the floor when I've told you to, hang it up or whatever? That's not really what you're mad about. It's about what's underneath. And a lot of times we just need to ask ourselves some questions before we just assume. I know I use the word assume. Oh no. So ask yourself, just ask yourself some questions. Like, maybe it's a matter of, am I feeling unheard or disrespected? Is this anger covering up some kind of fear or sadness or shame? Or does it remind you of a situation from the past that hurt you? If you can just dig a little bit deeper beneath that initial feeling of anger, you may be able to identify what the actual emotion is. To help identify the real trigger, understanding the anger iceberg theory may help. And that's a concept that was developed by the Gottman Institute. So if you want to do a little bit more research on that, you can Google that institute. It's the Gottman Institute. Anyway, so we know that anger is the tip of the iceberg. So hence the anger iceberg theory. But anger is just like that visible part of a deeper emotional experience. And like an iceberg, where only the tip is seen above the surface, anger is what we show on the outside and what we express on the outside. But underneath, there are typically more vulnerable emotions driving it. And bonus points for you if you're picturing an iceberg right now. Because, I know when I talk about it, immediately an iceberg just pops into my head with like the small part just kind of just hanging out, above the ocean. And then you got that big, huge part. Well, imagine that big, huge part where all those other vulnerable emotions are just chilling. Get it? Chilling, iceberg. Okay, never mind. So let's explore those other emotions that are chilling out under, in the big part. So we have hurt, which usually kind of hangs out with rejection and abandonment, betrayal. You have fear, which might accompany things like losing control. That was a big one for me, as you guys know. Failure, another one that was a big one for me. Uncertainty, guilt, and shame, which are not the same. Remember, shame is feeling like I am bad, and guilt is I did something bad. And also hanging out with those are just feeling unworthy or embarrassed. You may also find sadness or um, feeling lonely, hopelessness. And if you are feeling hopelessness, please reach out to somebody so you can talk to somebody, a counselor. You may even be grieving a loss. And let me just kind of branch out just a tiny bit that when we're in the beginning stages of recovery, you might actually even be grieving the loss of your addiction because it has been such a huge part of your life. That is normal. And for the loved one, you might also be grieving that as well, only because it's been such a normal part of your home. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because everyone's working towards a positive goal, but it's just normal because our brains are kind of going, wait, I'm so used to this. Why do I feel this way? Because your brain is now adjusting. It's just we kind of mourn what we no longer have. So we're just adjusting things. And you may be feeling frustrated and unheard. You might be feeling disappointed, especially if expectations are not being met. And one thing about expectations, make sure that your expectations are realistic because from my experience, I tended to set them super high. At first it was with my husband because I wanted his recovery to be like, oh, hey, you're going to attend 3 meetings and be cured, quote unquote cured. Of course, that's not how it works. Uh, and then when he didn't hit milestones like I thought that he should, I would be disappointed. And, I was just so terrible about comparing my recovery to his recovery. It never occurred to me that it took me over a decade to figure out emotional sobriety. Like, that never entered my brain. So, yeah, it was really bad. And then the other thing that I did was I put my own expectations of myself too high. So, as you guys know, I was in AA for a little bit and worked my steps. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to do my steps. Like, it's going to be great. I'm going to be done in, such and such time. And it's going to be super easy and everything's going to go just, peachy keen, sunshine and rainbows. Well, anyone who's worked the steps or if you're working them now, that's just not how it works. Because if you're working the steps, yeah, those suckers kick your ass. And also, if you're trying to do them in, I don't know, let's just say 30 days, yeah, maybe some people can. For me, I chose to do it a different way, and I chose I used Blueprint for Progress, and so I made it even more challenging on myself. And I thought I could do that in, a week. Yeah, that's not going to happen. So I had to lower my expectations of myself and realize you're setting this bar so high. What are you gaining by doing this? Because you're obviously not, you're trying to dig deep, but you're also trying to race through this, and by racing through it, you're not gaining anything. And so I really had to be careful with myself and allow myself the gift of time. Because sometimes, like when you're going, this is probably a terrible example, but it's the first thing that popped in my head. I don't like to drive in the rain at night because I have night blind. And so if I tried not to drive at night, but if I have to, and then it starts raining, I'm like, oh my God, my first instinct is I'm going to speed up because then I'll get there faster. Well, that's a terrible instinct to have. And so I have to remind myself, no, you moron, don't drive faster, slow down. Because if I drive faster, I'm putting myself and others at danger or at risk. So I slow down, and people are probably like, hey, old lady behind the wheel, what are you doing? But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, trust me, I'm doing the speed limit. You guys zoom past me all you want. I got to take this slowly. And that's how I had to look at my recovery and my healing. I had to do it at my own pace and slow down instead of doing it at my instinct to rush through it so I could just get it over with. So I hope that makes sense. Anyway, big diversion. But for people in addiction recovery and healing, anger can be a major trigger for relapse. Because if they only focus on the anger itself, they may miss underlying emotional pain that needs healing. Just like I was trying to rush through my steps and my workbook, I would have missed all the healing that I did to get to my emotional sobriety. Because it wouldn't have happened if I just rushed through it. I wouldn't have gotten to a place of calm. So by exploring those deeper emotions beneath the anger, we can address our real needs. We can learn to communicate more effectively, and then we can also develop healthier coping strategies. So, of course, as always, we want to pause and identify. So when anger arises, ask yourself, what else am I feeling? So let's take the wet towel example. You left the wet towel on the floor, like, oh my God, I'm so angry. Are you angry that the wet towel is on the floor, or are you angry at something else? Because odds are you're angry at something else. So what is it? Was it because you didn't feel like you were heard? Is it because you guys had an argument the night before and it was too scary to talk about what that argument was, and the wet towel is easier to get angry about? Or is there a feeling of rejection? So just kind of look a little bit deeper. And don't be afraid to communicate through vulnerability. So instead of just saying, I'm angry, try saying, I feel hurt because. And explain yourself. And leave out the words, you did this. Try using better words. Like, because when you say you're accusing somebody. And that puts their defenses up right away. And try to use healthy coping strategies like journaling, mindfulness, therapy. I mean, how many times can I say my counselor was just amazing? Especially if you're someone who has gone through any kind of trauma, PTSD. And a lot of us tend to think, oh, well, I was never in war. I don't have PTSD. PTSD comes in all shapes and sizes, so don't be afraid to reach out for help. And, because when you can name the real trigger, you have a better shot at dealing with it in a healthy way instead of letting it, just run all over you. I'll because okay, so I'll give you a personal example. Um, I because there was a time when I wasn't ready to face what was going on. Uh, Actually, I probably didn't realize what was going on, but this is a long time ago. Remember, I'm ancient, and I slipped on the floor. There was some water on the floor, and I fell, and I landed right on my ass and my elbow, and it hurt, but I mean, it wasn't that bad, and I burst into tears. And so my kids come running over. Mom, are you okay? Are you okay? And I just sat there on the floor sobbing. And instead of being like, thank you for coming and, trying to console me, I was like, why is there water on the floor? And of course, by then, one of them was already cleaning it up you know, and looking at me like, why why is she snapping at us? Like, they were just so confused. And I was obviously fine because I'm up and walking around, but crying a lot. And so that lasted for like, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes before I calmed down. And then I apologized. I was like, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have yelled at you. And the real reason I was crying was because my oldest was leaving the nest in like, I don't know, maybe a few days to a week, and I hadn't faced it yet. I didn't even realize that until I had reflected over my day when I was in bed that night. Because I had been putting off that tough emotion of my oldest leaving. Like, I just was not ready to face it. And I knew it was happening for months and months, but I wasn't ready yet. And it just kind of hit me all at once. And so recognizing the deeper emotions behind anger can help us react more thoughtfully. Like, I shouldn't have snapped at my kids like that. They were being good to me. And yeah, I apologized, but still, it shouldn't have happened in the first place. So, there is some good news. The chemical reaction of anger in your brain lasts about 90 seconds. And then after that, it's your thoughts that keep fueling it. So when you feel that rush of heat or tension, don't react to it right away. Use the 90-second rule. So you can take a deep breath and count to 90. And I'm not sure if anyone remembers me talking about this once before, but when I was going through my betrayal trauma, one of the things that I had to do to help me get through hypervigilance was count. And because it was the easiest way to get something that was easy to recall. It's kind of like, counting in ABCs. It's like when a trigger hits, counting in ABCs, because it's something it's easy to recall and you can just do it. So if you can take a deep breath and count to 90, then step away from the situation if you can. Remind yourself, this feeling will pass if I don't feed it. And this reminds me of one of my favorite parables. Maybe you've heard it, but it's the story of the two wolves. The grandfather tells his young grandson, a fight is going on inside me, a fight between two wolves. One is evil, full of anger, sorrow, regret, greed, self-pity, and false pride. The other is good, full of joy, peace, love, humility, kindness, and faith. The same fight is going on inside of you, grandson, and inside of every other person on the face of the earth. The grandson ponders this for a moment, and then he asks, Grandfather, which wolf will win? The old man smiled and simply said, The one that you feed. Okay, so I really love this parable because it can be applied to so many different situations in our lives, just like this one, but also to so many other different aspects of our recovery and our healing. So, which one will you feed? Anger and chaos or happiness and calm? We have to give ourselves space to let the intensity settle before deciding what we're going to do next. So take a moment and think of what steps you can take today to make that happen. That's like your little homework assignment for today. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is an emergency exit plan. I'm all about plans. Because triggers don't wait for inconvenient time to show up. Like, we'd love that if they did, but that's just not how life works. So that's why it's helpful to have a plan. You guys know we have go bags, right? We have those ready. So for those in recovery, keep a list of healthy coping strategies that work for you. Those, your go-to things. Keep them on your phone. Maybe that's reaching out to your sobriety circle or taking a walk, using that go bag, blasting your favorite song. Just have an emergency exit for whenever those urges or your anger just starts to push you towards your feelings of a relapse. And I have a setback prevention plan on my website, so feel free to download that. And for loved ones, same thing. Reach out to your healing hive. Use your go bag. Journal. Make sure that you're practicing self-care. It's one of the biggest things that I neglected during my healing. I just forgot to take care of myself. And then take a step back. If an argument is escalating, it's okay to say, I need a few minutes to cool off, but I want to keep talking when we're both calm. And remember, and I'm only saying this because I did it, you don't have to engage every time. I felt like I did. And one of our big unhealthy things that my husband and I did was we wanted to be the ones that had the last say, and we also wanted to prove each other right, or wrong rather. So we wanted to be the right one. Yeah, it's just so unhealthy. So yeah, but if you don't have an emergency kit, what's something you can do to create one? Or if you don't have a go bag, why not? Like, make your go bag. It's so essential. But also, and then something else you can do is move your body, because anger creates energy in your body. It's that, adrenaline kick, and it wants to come out somehow. My husband, we used to have, I kind of laugh at this now, but we used to have these things on the side of these big bricks on the side of our house that needed to be broken up. And so it was just kind of like a running joke, but he would just go out there and break up these bricks because it helped him release tension and anger and stuff. and it needed to be done anyway. So he would just go out there with a sledgehammer and just put on his safety glasses and break bricks. But what can you do to release frustration and anger? What's a healthy way that you can do that? If you run, walk, hit a punching bag, do some push ups, do some jumping jacks, uh, walk fast paced while focusing on deep breaths. If you're not into exercising, and I include this every time because I'm that person, uh, shake it out. Like literally, just shake out your whole body. Put on some music and move however feels right for you. You can clean. I don't know about you, but I love to get my, if I've had a rough day at work, I just like to pick a room and clean it. I guess because I feel productive after it's done as well. But dance, do some laps around your house, whatever you need to do. But getting physical can help reset your nervous system and bring you back to a place where you can think clearly. And one of my new favorite movements to get up and move and actually get real exercise because it wears me out is playing jolly ball. I don't know if anybody's heard that with my Dobermans, because let me tell you something. If you guys, any of you have Dobermans, you know what I'm talking about. These dogs are active, so they need to stay active. And our backyard, we've had a lot of rain, so it's muddy, so they can't run around like fiends back there. So we've been playing jolly ball in the house. Whew, I'm not sure who gets more tired, me or them, but it's so much fun. Anyway, and you can also try rewriting the story in your head, because anger comes from the meaning that we attach to a situation. For instance, if someone doesn't include you, your mind might go to, they don't care about me. Or if your partner brings up something from the past, you might hear, they're never going to trust me again. So pause and ask yourself, what else could be true? Maybe it was a family only event and that's why you didn't get invited. Or maybe they're scared too. Maybe this isn't about me at all. There could be a lot of things going on. So reframing the story in your head can also help soften that anger and bring more understanding into that moment. Is there an example of when reframing could have helped you? I know there were times where it definitely would have helped me. One of the biggest things you can do when anger hits, drumroll please, nothing. I know, right? Boring. At least not right away. Because I can definitely say that there were mistakes made by me acting in anger. This is a huge debate across forums, and it's probably something I shouldn't, get too deep into here because that's not what this podcast is about, or this episode is about. But I, in a moment of anger, reached out to someone that I should not have, and it was in a moment of anger. I wish I could take it back, but I didn't, or I couldn't. And if I had just waited, then I would have saved myself a lot of anguish. So if you're tempted to send an angry text, an angry email, an angry message, respond in an angry tone in an argument, or even make a big decision in the heat of the moment, please wait. Give yourself time. I mean, whether that's 10 minutes or 24 hours, just to give yourself time to cool down. More often than not, you'll handle things better when you're not in that full fight or flight mode. And I also want to add that I did this with my marriage too. My first instinct, as you know, was to cut and run after disclosure. I came back, I got into counseling, and I talked to my husband's CSAT, and then I talked to my counselor, and I decided to wait. Now, this is not for everybody, of course, but uh, they advised that because I was in no immediate danger, I had not been abused, that this would be a good opportunity to work on me, my healing, my recovery, while he worked on his healing and his recovery, and that I needed to take the word divorce out of our conversations. And that's when we developed, that concept of us, where, three recoveries, mine, his, and then the relationship. But it was just because it was such an emotionally charged time, everything was being, all my decisions at that time were based on triggers that I was experiencing, anger that I was feeling. And so I decided to just step back and do nothing. That one was hard. Anger isn't necessarily bad, it's information, right? The key is learning how to express it in a way that doesn't lead to harm, either to yourself or others. So, we've already talked about journaling uh, and talking to our trusted friends, and, whether that's your healing circle, or your healing hive or sobriety circle, or your therapist. If you don't have a support group, please find one. If possible, a trusted friend. There are healthy forums out there. But if none of these things are available, I'm going to suggest that you talk to, if you have a pet, talk to your pet. If you have plants, talk to your plants. Yes, this sounds silly, but these are some of the things I did, and I share them with you in my moment of vulnerability, but it worked. It's just the way of putting it out into the universe. Or talk to yourself in the mirror. Get it out. That's what we need to be doing. Or channel it into something creative. I talk a lot about painting or playing music. Build something. Start a blog. That's how I did it. I loved blogging. Of course, I still blog. Podcast. Let the energy turn into something meaningful. And remember, what you're fighting for. If you're in recovery, anger can feel like this big setup for a relapse. But remember, you have worked too hard to let a temporary emotion take that away from you. If you're a loved one, that anger can feel like a big wall between you and the person you care about. But remember, you're on the same team. Even when things feel hard as shit, you need to be turning toward one another, not away. So the more tools we can utilize in our toolkit to help us manage that anger, the better chances we have at successful communication in our relationship. I'm sorry, I should have drank water. And before reacting, pause and ask, will this choice bring me closer to the life I want, or is it going to end up making it further away? Anger may not be this great emotion that we have, but it can be a guide, like a teacher, if we learn how to handle it instead of letting it handle us. So breathe, step back, and choose wisely, because you got this. You are my superstars. What helps you manage anger without letting it take over? Because I'm curious. I really do want to know. I would love to know what tools that you use. You can reach me at Facebook at Bookends Addiction of Recovery, or at my website, bookendsofrecovery.com. You can sign up for my newsletter on there. And if you have any questions, just let me know. I want you to all take care. You are worthy of only the best. And there is also a worksheet to go along with this podcast, which you can find over at my website. This is Laura, sending you the very best. Signing off.